Hey everybody, it's Josh with Renew Design Build, and chances are if you are considering a major renovation project or a big addition, you're feeling a little overwhelmed. These projects are really detailed, they're very invasive, and if you don't plan them out really well early on and establish the scope of work, the budget, the details of the project, they can be really stressful. We plan and build these projects day in and day out for our clients, and I wanted to shoot a video to walk through how that process looks. You know, we can often spend twice as much time in the planning phase as we do in the construction phase on a project like this, and so that can be a little bit taxing on a client. They may want to get to building something sooner rather than later, but understanding what is happening during that phase, the decisions that are getting made, and what they will help us do down the road is really key. So after we have entered into a relationship with a client, we've identified a scope of work and a rough budget, the first phase is to document the existing house. So we want to really dig into the details of the mechanical systems, the structural systems, understanding what finishes are there, whether or not there's any hazardous materials present in the form of lead-based paint or asbestos, and getting an understanding of what we're starting with. Figure out what our palette to work with is and what elements of the home are going to remain after the project. If there's design constraints like architectural details, finishes we need to incorporate or match or play off of in the design, all of those things are really key in that initial phase. Once we've established that, we do some initial dreaming around structural changes or structural additions that may happen. We deal with the massing of how these spaces will work, the flow for the layout. We do all of this in a 3D model with a client so that we can really visualize what these spaces will look like very well early on. Once we've worked through that layout, it's the time we get to start dealing with some of the prettier aspects of the project. We go from working with a generic palette of finishes in the model to specifying actual products for each element, cabinetry colors, appliance selections, sinks, faucets, all of these things. We get to go out and touch and feel them in showrooms and start to really develop a design board that reflects a client's personality and how they want to live in a space. It's going to function well for the type of lifestyle they have. Kids, pets, are these things considerations? Our designers are going to walk each client through a very well thought out process to make sure that all of these selections come together into a cohesive space that really enriches the way that each of our projects reflects the way that you live in your home. Now, simultaneously with the selections of these finishes and fixtures, our team is also actually documenting those systems that we were talking about. So we're going to come in with plumbers, with electricians, HVAC contractors, any of the subcontractors that are going to be getting into those systems, the structural, the thermal and moisture systems in the home, and we're going to be identifying a scope of work for them, getting written estimates, of course, and really game planning how this work is going to be completed so that when we go to pull the trigger on the construction, everybody's been on site and is familiar with the project. That way we can actually get accurate estimates on not only the cost, but also the schedule. How long is it going to take each client or each subcontractor to do their portion of the work? And when we found that these pre-construction site walks with the subcontractors really help us come up with questions that maybe our team in-house haven't even run into before. We'll get one of the reps from the plumber on site and we may identify some fittings or some piping that maybe has been problematic in the past. So those kind of things really get digested through in this design phase, and we're able to minimize a lot of the horror stories that you've heard, I'm sure, of opening up walls and finding problems. Well, we want to open those walls up early on in that design phase so that those problems are discovered and priced into the scope of work. So once we have done all this research, once we've selected the finishes, all the fixtures, and we've walked on site with each contractor that's going to be involved, we have all of the information we need to sign a contract. Our team then assembles that information. So we write a full spec book for the project, and that's going to include every single fixture and finish that goes into it. We have interior and maybe structural drawings that are going to be included, any engineering that's involved, whether that's structural, stormwater engineering, geotechnical engineering, all of those things are included. We put all of that together into a packet that we can sit down with a client, review, and sign a contract on. That gives us the clarity to go back and reference at some point in the project, 8 months down the road as we're nearing completion on it, we can go back and reference that and say, well, what did all the documentation say? And we've got a common point to start from. So rather than pulling the trigger on a obscure scope of work, we've got a really detailed starting point. And during the process, we may discover additional work that a client would like to have completed. It's not uncommon for a client to decide midstream that they would like to repaint this other room or include some other scope of work that maybe we explored at one point but chose to eliminate from the original contract for budget concerns. We're able to make those changes on the fly with a client, but we can always go back to that original scope of work and reference that as our starting point for the project. The final phase on this, being that contract prep, then is to hand this whole thing off to the production team. One other thing that's certainly going to be discussed as we develop these projects are the livability of the home. We have projects that are minimally invasive. Maybe we're just sectioning off one part of the home and we can kind of do our work over there and coexist pretty easily with a client. Other times we're really diving deep into the guts of a home and really making it a pretty unlivable space. So that conversation is had early on. And then if a client is going to be living in the home towards the tail end of that design phase, we're going to do a meeting on site with the production team, the client, and any of the key subs to discuss what does that look like? What are our working hours? It's a pre-construction meeting where everybody gets to get together and game plan, what this really looks like day to day for storage space, parking, where we're gonna stockpile materials, that sort of thing. So to recap, we are doing some discovery on the existing home. There's a lot of selections that get made with our designers and the client. We're gonna walk key subcontractors and our team through, certainly produce any documentation that needs to be produced for acquiring permits. And finally, game plan what does the day-to-day of producing a project like this work or look like with our team and the client. If you want to get more specific, if you'd like to have a conversation about what this looks like on your project, of course, fill out a form on the website. I'll be in touch within 24 hours. I'm happy to chat with you about your project and what working with Renew would look like for you.